You're not alone. If you need someone to talk to today, please contact Crisis Services Canada by either calling them at 1-833-456-4566 all hours of the day, or you can text them at 45645 at 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern Time. Remember, you're not alone, and Crisis Services Canada is here to help. Welcome to another edition of Coffee with Graham on Amateur Sports TV. I'm your host, Graham Forsyth. Today's edition of the show is brought to you by Pure Nata and Fabricland Winkler. My guest today is Brad Kirk in this Week 13 edition of MFHL season coverage. Brad joins me today to talk about where the MFHL is at right now with the return to play process. Of course, the January 8th date of COVID-19 restrictions got extended to January 22nd. I had a chance to speak to Brad about when the league is planning to start up again, what date they're shooting for. I also had a chance to speak to him about who's been involved in the discussions in terms of return to play. I had a chance to ask him what those discussions have looked like in terms of return to play, and I also had a chance to talk to Brad about how league awards work in the MFHL and also how all-star selections work as well. That's near the end of the interview. But without further ado, I'll bring in the man himself, Brad Kirk, league president of the MFHL, for this Week 13 edition of MFHL season coverage here on Amateur Sports TV. Brad joined me last time in November of 2020. He joins me now today to give us an update about where the league is at in their return to play process. Of course, restrictions in Manitoba being extended until January 22nd. Of course, we hope that those restrictions, we kind of go back into that code orange zone so we can see some hockey here being played in terms of minor hockey in Manitoba, and of course anywhere else in Canada, but for the sake of this episode, Manitoba. But Brad, thanks so much for joining me on this Wednesday afternoon here in wherever you're at right now.
Yeah, thank you very much from sunny St. Anne. It's always a pleasure to have a chat, have a chance to chat, Graham, and talk about our league and things going on. So.
Yeah, and let me tell you, I think that we're in a pretty good place right now in terms of numbers. I know that on Tuesday we were at about 92 cases. It raised a bit today as it went back to 158 cases, but that's better than us being in the 200 range, or even worse, the 300 or 400 range for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think you're also seeing probably a big difference in different areas as well, right? So we don't know what that'll bode for us in the next couple of weeks, but yeah, some big variations in different areas as well.
Yeah, so we're going to just start off by asking this question. I know that the last time I talked to you, one of the times was that you said that the league had a team meeting last Wednesday. So could you just speak about how that meeting went, and actually have you guys had other meetings since?
Yeah, so we haven't had any meetings since, but it did go really well in the sense that everybody's committed to having a league. And we don't know what the format that it's gonna shape up to be, but I think that the message is, we all want to play. We recognize we may not have a full schedule like what we've had in the past. And by full schedule, I'm only referring to league games. I think everybody's sort of resigned to the fact that sort of the extra showcases and that kind of stuff that many of the teams have enjoyed in the past is not going to happen this year. Or if it is, it's going to be on a much smaller scale and more local, but at least having something. And as well as having some form of playoffs in order to appoint a league winner, provincial winner. So I think everybody's all gearing towards that. It's a matter of when can we get started, right? When can we start to deal with the rest of our schedule that we have, add those additional games, see how many games we can actually get in, and then playoffs. And we've got a couple ideas. around what to do. But a lot of times it depends on when we get the final okay to actually start before we can enact that.
So just before we get into the specifics about just the number of games that you guys are looking at putting out there when you guys eventually do return to play in playoffs as well, just how many members have been at these meetings? I know that it must be at least one team representative from at least every team in the league. But other than that, I know that yourself have been in team meetings, but who has all been in these discussions?
Yeah, so it's at least one member from each team. Sometimes it's a coach. Other times it might be a coach and the regional vice president or director, I guess, for that region. It sort of depends who can make it. In some cases, like Westman, that is the person, right? It's the same. Guy is the coach and also the regional or the vice director for female for that. And then it's managers, so people that are really closely aligned with that particular team. But we also have members of the board that can make it. So myself, Cal Harrison, Pam when she's been able to make it, and that. So it's a good representation. So we're all, not the last meeting we had, I was honest and said there's not a set agenda. We just want to have an open and honest discussion as to what's going on and get your thoughts as to what we want to do and where we're at and how quickly we can get on. So everybody's at the table in these discussions. It's not just teams from certain areas making the call. Like everybody's got a lot of experience, especially at that table. When you think of a number of the coaches have been involved in these programs for a long time, and so it's great. Great to get that kind of experience to discuss, to make things work and to recognize the sort of the new reality that we're at for this season.
Yeah, and just all the optimism. I think the optimism is such a great thing, and just from reading the tweet that was posted on January 7th, it said that the MFHL met January 6th. All the members are committed to restarting league play ASAP once cleared by Hockey Manitoba and provincial health authorities. Scenarios were discussed, and members look to move forward with on and off ice events when appropriately allowed to return to play. And it seems like there's such a great optimism and such a great buy-in. And just for you as the league president, knowing the tough times that have been in 2020 and just some of the tough times now in 2021, how nice does it make you feel to see that there is that optimism from everyone?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, bottom line is everybody's thinking about the girls and yeah, the safety of their teams and their families and all that. But, everybody wants to get their players involved, right? A lot of these girls, this is their last season, and they want to get something, them to play. Some girls may have had, this is their fourth, right? If they started as a major age bantam, if there's any girls like that in the program. So everybody wants to get something involved and know that, we can make it work. We just need the approval, I guess, the okay to do it. And folks are smart enough to make sure that they protect their teams and do everything that they need to follow to get them on the ice. So, because I think it is just, everybody's just, they want to get some sense of normalcy, at least something more than working out in your basement or working in your backyard or on the ODR or that sort of stuff, right? So want to get those contacts and moving again. So.
And in that tweet that I just read from January 7th, posted by you guys on your Twitter at MFHL U18 AAA, it said that obviously there's been on ice and off ice scenarios discussed. Could you talk about those on ice scenarios that have been discussed first of all?
Yeah, so the on ice scenarios is really around practices, right? Because nobody's been able to practice and not allowed to have any sort of practices. So it's really about getting the teams back on the ice, at least for a week, right? We had talked about the optimistic scenario. I was optimistic that we'd be released. We'd come out of the red zone on January the 8th, and we could be starting this week. I mean, that was sort of my starting point with them. And everybody said, at least if we can get a couple of times on the ice to get them there, get their legs back, not completely because everybody's in the exact same boat. and then getting playing games as soon as we can. So that's really what the on ice is more around practices. Some of the off ice stuff is more, getting back. Some teams have the ability to go into, formal gyms and have, workout like that. Others use school facilities, halls. Maybe they have actually something that's available within their gyms, within their rinks to actually do that kind of stuff. So that's really what some of the off ice stuff has been. I know a lot of teams have been trying to do off ice activities virtually. The Avros, I think, have had a number of different activities, and they're a little bit more public on some of the things that they do. But I think a lot of the other teams have done some of the same stuff, where they're doing some of these workout things. They're getting speakers and they're talking about their season and what they can do, and doing it virtually, and everybody in their own homes, and doing what they can within their own homes. But I think it's trying to move away from that to getting everybody together.
Yeah, and I've really noticed that about every single team has had some sort of virtual workouts, which is great to see. They really staying connected with their teammates, with their coaches, and just their team in general, and that's a great thing to see. So we talked about some of the on ice scenarios that you just talked about. Could we move into the off ice scenarios that have been talked about?
Yeah, so it's like I said, it's about getting back into the gyms. It's about, I don't think there's none of the teams that are looking to do like sort of the team building activities, like some of the fun things that some teams have done, scavenger hunts. Like, I don't think there's anything like that. It's more about what we can do to condition the girls, and in a short period of time. And do it in a healthy way, so that nobody gets hurt in that, especially in the first games. It could be as simple as, maybe they're going in and doing some yoga or Pilates or something like that for stretching, right? Hopefully a lot of those girls have been doing that already on their own, but doing it as a team, so that when they do start to get back on the ice and have that competition, and that nobody, that you'd hate to see in the very first game that somebody goes back, that they get hurt because they hurt, they hurt a hamstring, right? Yeah. Or they did some sort of injury just because they haven't been able to use all those muscles, or haven't been able to stretch them, and that. So I think that's what a lot of the teams are going to want to get to is you're not going to make that much of a change in a week, but at least you can maybe limber up some of those muscles. So.
Yeah, for sure. And such a big thing is getting those muscles ready, prepared, getting your body back into game shape for the amount of time that is going to be given to be able to do that when return to play does eventually happen. So, of course, you guys can't start anything up until at least January 22nd if everything goes to plan and the restrictions go back into the code orange zone, at least. But what is the desired start date for the MFHL at this point to return to play?
I think we didn't set a date at our last meeting because we're really depending on what happens with the OK, but everybody seems to be around that February 1st, whatever that weekend works to be. That everybody's gut is around that. So if everything is released on the 22nd, that kind of lines up with what we were thinking of having a week of activities, either on or off ice to get the girls ready. And again, everybody's in the same boat. So it's not like we have some teams that be able to do stuff and others haven't. We're all at the same, which is a little different than even in the summer. When you think of when we start up, there's some teams that do activities during the summer and do a fair amount of activities in the summer, whereas others don't have their tryouts until later on in the year. And so they don't have their team set until sometime in August, whereas Winnipeg is typically being earlier than that. Mm-hmm. So everybody's really on the same, starting at the same point. There's no advantage to time in this particular scenario. So I think it's around, whenever we get the okay, if it's on a Friday, hopefully starting up and really picking up our schedule from where we left off. In this schedule, starting from that following weekend or that following week. It depends if we have games during the week in that. We'd have to look at it, but that's really what we're planning on doing at least from the get-go. So.
And just you guys are sanctioned by Hockey Manitoba, of course, and you've been following along with their return to play plan, obviously, because that's the plan that everybody is following in Manitoba. Just what have the discussions been like with Hockey Manitoba from the MFHL side of it?
Yeah, so we one of our board members is Cal Harrison. He is the vice president for female for Hockey Manitoba, and and I guess in some of the discussions or emails and that around it has been around. You know what, he doesn't have any answers yet on when we can start, and I think it's I get the sense that it's really up to each league to determine how they want to approach this. One of the things that we did have to deal with is, Hockey Canada coming in and asking us for a commitment that if Esso Cup were to run, would we participate? And the answer was at the board level was resounding yes, we will participate. And if they do have that, it's highly unlikely they will. But if they do have that sort of a national championship, that Manitoba absolutely will. Send a team to Westerns, assuming there is a Westerns, and and go through that sort of process. So that's really what it's been around with Hockey Manitoba, is with Cal, and the direction is, he doesn't have any more answers than we do at this point, and as a league, we have to do, we're the ones that are going to make the call as to when we're ready to go, and do that at sort of the league meeting.
Yeah, well, great to know that if the Esso Cup does happen, it has been a resounding yes from just you guys and everyone from Hockey Manitoba. That's great to hear, because it would be great to see maybe a team from Manitoba going to the Esso Cup this year, and just all the teams in Canada in general going to the Esso Cup. That'd be great. Get us having a national championship, have the chance to crown one of those teams as the national champion this year. So we're going to go to our first commercial break here in the show. Okay. I'm joined by President Brad Kirk of the MFHL. I'll be right back. You're going to hear from our official sponsor, one of our official sponsors of the show, in Pure Innata. And of course, it's Natural Beauty made in Canada. Check out this commercial. I'll be right back with League President Brad Kirk in just a moment here on Coffee with Graham's MFHL season coverage on ASTV. Back here on the network with Brad Kirk for this Week 13 edition of MFHL season coverage. Of course, you just heard from our lovely sponsor, Pure Innata, Natural Beauty made in Canada. And if you guys want to check them out, just type in Pure Innata in your browser and you'll be able to find their wonderful products on their website. So we're going to move into just some of the stuff that we talked about last time, Brad. Last time I talked to you, there were some key points that we hit on. We're going to expand on those things because obviously a lot has changed from November to now. But just starting off with one of the first questions I asked you in that interview was just how you've been talking to teams, how you've been able to, and you said it's been like a few one-on-one conversations with different teams on more through email than anything else, but a couple phone calls, just sort of what your approach was. So just could you talk about how have the conversations been communicated since then? Has it been kind of some of those same things, or have they kind of expanded in the way that you're more talking to them maybe in person on the phone?
Yeah, it's more of the same. It's more of the emails and that sort of thing. I think more than anything else. Some of it's more due to my schedule, and I'm finding email and text might be the easiest way to communicate. Just work, unfortunately, gets in the way sometimes. So I think it's been more of the same, and it's kind of I found is the easiest way, because if there is a question that somebody has that maybe other teams may have the same, it's easier to versus playing that telephone game where if somebody says one thing and gets translated into something else by the end of a call, it's something different. So I found written communications may be the most efficient in dealing with this. The situation we're in right now. So yeah, much more of the same. There probably wasn't much in the way of communications during December. For a good chunk of December, because we really didn't have any answers. Right? It's you kind of let teams do what they needed to do, and whatever they, as a league, there's not much more guidance we can provide, other than there may have been teams that asked about ice time. Right. And what are we doing about ice time? And do I need to give up? Because there are some facilities that may have been looking at scheduling and that kind of stuff. And, the message to them was, do not cancel your ice. When we're ready to go, we'll just continue on. So whatever you had booked, don't move that and keep that up, keep those bookings up. So that was, one of the common questions that was coming our way as to what to do for when we do start.
And another question that I asked you was just how the meetings were going so far at that time. And one of the things that you pointed at was you thought it gets to where some of the teams have greater restrictions, and teams that were impacted, obviously the two Winnipeg teams were impacted the most because we were the first zone here in Winnipeg in terms of health region, to go into full code red. And then you also had teams like Eastman, like you said, that was greatly affected, with about 10 of those skaters of their 17 skaters being impacted in those areas that they were in. Just talking about how just some of their coaches were too. You talked about how Pembina Valley, you thought that was one of the teams that was affected too, and also Central Plains. But just say we do get back into that code orange zone, but maybe some places in Manitoba, some health regions don't exactly clear into that code orange zone. Which teams do you think are going to have the most impact when it comes to that?
Yeah, I think it was actually a discussion item that happened the last time, to say what happens if not all of us are in orange, at the same time. And I think if a decision is made at the health authority to call it the Metro Winnipeg region, then that really only leaves like with full teams that could have regular games, but I think we landed on it would only be exhibition games, would just be Westman and Yellowhead, because every other team is impacted, and in some cases it was taken out of the team's hands. So, for example, Eastman, they went through and they just outright restricted, even though some members of the team would have been okay to practice. They just went through and across the board at all levels of hockey, AAA and under, and said nobody's playing, right? So it was basically taken out of the team's hand. I don't know whether Interlake and those three, I know Central Plains didn't take that approach, and Pembina Valley, but Eastman did, because I think it has, and I would suspect Interlake may be the same, it had the most bodies that would have been impacted by the Metro Winnipeg. If we get to and in that kind of case, what we would end up doing is just, not having any league games, but really letting Yellowhead and Westman, have the games that they want, assuming their region lets them. And, they would just be exhibition games basically between those two. And maybe, they could play, Pembina Valley, and it basically would be an exhibition schedule that they could have for, I would hope it'll be a short period of time. If we get to and I think it would be a similar situation if we get to where it's only Winnipeg. I don't know nobody seems to know what the thinking is, whether it be Winnipeg only or Metro Winnipeg or that kind of stuff. A lot of stuff we're sort of speculating. We really hope that when they make this decision, they'll just put everybody in orange, versus sort of a piecemeal approach. But I don't know. It's hard to say. We more or less went down the path of, hey, if it's the Prairie Mountain is given orange and Metro Winnipeg is still red, then we're likely in the same situation like we were at the beginning of November. That's kind of a feel for everyone around the table.
Moving into scheduling now, last time I talked to you, you said there were about like 3 options on the table. One of them had to do with like showcases. Obviously, that's not going to happen now.
Yeah.
One of them had to do with like whether the SO Cup is going to be happening. And usually, you said the league historically ends on February 14th. So another one that was also discussed was maybe, if you can't get the full 28 games in, you could be flexible and maybe have these teams playing like 27, 26 games. But obviously, I feel like that number will probably go down now. So what have been just the situations, the scenarios that have been discussed about the number of games that you guys want to get back with the schedule when it does happen?
Yeah. That absolutely something that we chatted about. Like if we, there's what we've talked about is once we get started that we would just pick up the schedule as it is. So whatever we have, that's what we would pick up, and those are the games that we would play up until February 14th. After that, we've gone to all the teams and they're going to have to work with their facilities in order to get additional ice time to schedule games. In some cases, teams may be able to use what they had already scheduled for playoffs, right? There are some facilities, especially in Winnipeg, where they had to book their playoff ice well in advance in September. And so they know they have playoff ice available already. They have, on a Saturday, Sunday, maybe Fridays, and even during the week. And they also have, their practice ice as well, that maybe there's some flexibility. So we know that, teams are going to have to schedule. You're right. It's not going to be, there's no, when I look at, I've got a grid here that says the number of games. Like if we had actually started our games this weekend, if everything was given the clear, we would have had 31 games. We would have finished till February 14th. And that meant we needed to find 59 games that we would need to schedule. So the more that we, delay things, that 31 decreases and the 59 increases, sort of depending on how each weekend goes and how each goes. So it's going to be tough to get to 28 games. And I think everyone at the table, and I think we even said that at the beginning of our league, is that it may come to something where, you determine first through 8 by something like a winning percentage. There may be a team that has 16 games in, another team that has 14 games or 20 and that kind of stuff. And I think how we're going to have to determine our rankings is by a winning percentage. Is likely to have somebody, every team sitting at the same number of games and played the same teams exactly in amount of time. I think folks have recognized it's probably not going to happen. And we've just got to be a little bit more flexible. So, what we're thinking of is teams needing to schedule from February 15th until probably the end of March and close to the end of March. And we've kind of thrown out an idea of starting on March 23rd for playoffs and then running playoffs similar in the mail program where they go every second day. And or you basically have 8 days to finish a best of 5. And that way it would take you to the end of April. So by assuming we're not going to have an ESO Cup, or if we do have an ESO Cup, it won't happen in an April timeframe. It would be after that. That we would have the ability to at least get some of a schedule and then some of a playoff in. But I think everybody is still, they haven't booked any ice yet. Some teams have because of playoffs. Other teams may have the flexibility with their facilities to call them up and say, hey, I need, literally a week before, I need this amount of ice time. It really depends on where they're at, right? And some of the minor programs that are in those communities.
Yeah, and it seems like if playoffs do happen, it's going to be pretty rapid fire. A lot of games played in a short amount of time. But that begs the question: with an 8-team league, there's usually about 3 rounds of playoffs, starting with the quarterfinals, the semifinals, then the finals. Is there any changes coming to the number of games that these teams are going to play in, like the first round, the semifinals, and in the finals?
Right now, we're still thinking of 3 best of 5s. Right. And, but by shortening the number of days that you can finish that up. So if you do every second day, so you do like a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and then so on, you can fit that best of 5 in an 8-day, 8-day period. You may have to have some back-to-backs, but you still fit it in within the 8 days. And, again, that's dependent on ice availability and that. But, right now, when we chatted about it last week was still, let's still do best of fives. We're not ready to turn it into a best of three, that sort of thing at this point. I think we still want to, we're optimistic that we can fit in that kind of a schedule.
Back here with Brad Kirk, president of the MFHL, here on this Week 13 edition of MFHL season coverage. We've been talking a lot about just what the team meetings have been like up until this point. Of course, they had their last league meeting last Wednesday, and just we've been talking about what's going to happen with like the scheduling. We talked about just what's happening in general with the league, all that good stuff, and now we're going to move into just how facilities are going to work, just how it's going to be facilitated in terms of just how many people are going to be able to be let into the arenas. I know that last time you said that you guys didn't have control over it. You said that it's really up to those facilities, and they were allowing about 2 players per two spectators per players. But just, is that going to change at all? Have you been able to chat with these facilities throughout this time?
No, I don't think that's going to change. I think that's still what the limit is, because anything that although, I don't know if they've updated the return to play documents. I mean, there was a threshold of, I think, whatever the percentage was it 25 or 50%, depending on the facilities, I think. That still is the goal, is to have 2 per, 2 parents or visitors per player, and so that hasn't changed. That'll continue unless the rules are dictated by us to say nobody watching the games, and that's entirely a possibility. But our view as a league that we actually still want to have, and don't see a reason why you can't have people in the stands to watch the players, and either be family members or close friends, whatever the 2 that they do. And there's no magic to 2. It just sort of, that's what happened to work out when you do the math. It ends up being two per player. So I think that's our goal, is to continue with that as a league, unless we are told otherwise.
And I know that there's been a lot of changes in terms of like pre-game warm-ups, just how many players can be in a dressing room at once. Could you just speak about how it was in October and how that was working?
Yeah, it honestly was a little, and it wasn't the team's fault. It was more the facilities and people trying to understand. What we try to do with all the teams is to document what those rules were, and basically have it on a spreadsheet as much as we can. And where they knew the information to say, hey, here's how many rooms you're going to get. Here's how many players that are allowed per room. Here's when you're allowed to go into the facility. And where your spots are for warm up. From what I heard, everyone was able to comply with whatever the rules were in each area, and the key was always communication. The coaches, the manager from the visiting team contacting the home team and just double checking, because what we found is that in some cases the rules changed. Even though we went through in September to try to document everything early October, some of the facilities changed the rules, and it wasn't the team changing it. It was more the health authority coming in over top and requiring certain changes. So that was the message, is continue to have those communications with the visiting team when you're going somewhere, because it may have changed from what we had on our little grid. We try to, like I said, try to create a cheat sheet, if you will, so that folks would know what they're walking into. And so including where are you going to warm up, and at least it was warm back then, and so people could do their warm-ups outside. You start in January, the warm-ups might be on a bus, or running around your car or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
So it might be a little bit different. Then nobody had to sort of face those questions, because we had to stop the league in November, so we never really ran across where you had snow that you had to deal with. So that'll be, I think, a learning point for teams at that point. If they can't go into a rink to warm up, we'll have to sort through that.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see who really is Canadian, who can stay outside during this warm up.
Yeah.
I kid for sure. It's not fun warming up in about, I don't know, like minus 30, minus 40 weather, but it's going to be interesting to see for sure. So just in terms of like the pre-game warm-up stuff like that, do you think that maybe these facilities are going to go stricter on the rules and maybe change things up a bit?
That's a good question. I don't know how much more strict some of them could get. When you're not allowed, some of the rinks where, you would have a room that was in the back, or a part of the rink where they had warm-ups and they stopped allowing it, when we were playing before. I don't know how much more strict they could get. The only thing they could do is even having less bodies in a room, and requiring, basically teams to change in shifts, and only giving us one room at a time. So, to prevent, some of the cleanup that, or the cleaning that needs to happen between games. That might be one where rinks are going through and doing that. Some facilities like in Westman, if they're the last facility of the last rental, I guess, of the evening, they may be okay, right? And giving them multiple rooms to change and saying, yeah, you can only have 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever per room, whatever the number is. But here's the 2 rooms you have. Whereas other facilities, if the games are earlier on, they may only still give us one. And then because there's a rental that's happening after the game, and the staff don't have the time to do the turnover quick enough. So I think, we haven't heard any changes yet that are happening. I think it'll be the same amount of restrictions as what was in place prior.
And what did those numbers look like per group back in October?
It depended on the rink. We had some facilities that only allowed 8 players per room, and they only were given one room. So you really would have 8 girls go in, change, except for skates, and then have to leave and either sit out in the rink area or go back if they took a bus, go back to the bus. And then the other 8 would go. So, coaches having to do the team speech twice, because they can't have everybody in the same room, or wait till everybody's on the bench, right, and do that speech on the bench. So I think, and then there was some teams that were up to 10, and I think there may have even been one facility that was up to 12 just because of the size of the room. So it was 8 to 12, depending on the size of the rooms.
We're going to move in now into league awards and just how the league awards and just the all-star selections work. So when did you guys start doing league awards?
We've had for many years, we've had first and second team star for as long as I remember. And, I haven't been with the league for the entire time, but we've had that sort of concept right from the get-go. We brought in the concept of having the different, like the top defenseman and rookie and all that. This will be, I think, the 4th year of having these awards. And it'll be the 4th year of having them. And then last year was the first time that we brought in a playoff MVP concept, because we didn't have that. We didn't have that before. And also last year we brought in a first place overall in the league. We always had a league winner that would win the ultimate thing, but what happened during the regular season in your first place? And so we never had that award before. So the 1920 was the first time that we instituted that particular award. So when we're going through the award process, it's a lot of, it's more the teams submitting. We have forms, a form that we submit to the teams, to the coaching staff. and they are to basically give their open and honest views as to who they think should be able to, who should be a top defenseman, who's a top goalie, and all the different awards that we have, and give their honest views as to what's going. And it doesn't have to be just from their team, right? They've all played each other. They all know, and it's not necessarily just about playoffs. It's really before playoffs. So you've played everybody since beginning of October. You should have a really good feel as to, who's doing what. You've seen the stats, you've talked to the other coaches, and all the teams are really great and being honest and saying, you know what, if they recognize I'm with Eastman and I think that girl from Yellowhead is a phenomenal goalie, you know what, they will nominate that person. And so all those submissions will be into us as the board. And we've strongly encouraged them to have write-ups as well. So something to say, this is why, because you got 8 different teams that are making a submission, you can have a tie, right? So having that color that's around really helps to see what they think. So some really wonderful things that people have said about other teams and the players on their teams. It's quite remarkable how close the teams are, and know the players. And then we as a league will go through and review everything. And some of them are pretty clear in some years as to who's getting a certain award. When you get 8 teams all nominating the same individual, that's an easy thing. And then others get a little bit tighter when it's a little closer.
And yeah, you guys have added a playoff MVP throughout the years, and just like you said last year, first place award for the regular season. So are the awards, of course, there's a playoff MVP, but are the awards based on regular season, playoffs, or you combine both into them to make the decision?
Yeah. The first set of awards, like the first team and second team All-Star and the individual awards, are just based on league play. So what we would like to do is try to have those all nailed down before we even start playoffs. And so our goal, and we haven't been as successful, but hopefully we can get to that point that so if, let's say, somebody from Westman is winning one of those awards, that a member of the board can go there and present the plaque, right, as part of the first game, so that they're there, they get that. It'd be great to have some of these things at different banquets, but you never know when they're going to schedule, and some of them do different things. So, it's best to get out there and have it. But we will announce it on our site when we have those awards, and try to have the write-ups and the information about that. But that's based on just league play, and then the playoff is obviously just about playoffs, and that's it. But we do try to have the rest of those awards completed by the end of the regular season.
And have you guys ever thought of doing like a playoff set of awards? Of course, you guys got the playoff MVP, but doing like mirroring the regular season awards and using the same for playoffs?
Yeah, you know what? It's come up, but I think we haven't landed on. I don't want to call it baby steps, but that's probably about it. Is to slowly say, what are other ways that we can recognize our players? The playoff MVP was sort of a first step, and you're right. It's kind of come up, but nothing concrete at this point to have that, because it tends to be more the teams that are in the championship that probably get it more than anything else. And so I think it's something we may continue to debate. We do like the MVP award, because that is that's pretty clear that there usually is one player that's just that impact player through the entire
up here. Yeah.
That just something changes. Maybe they're great all through season, but you hit playoffs and they seem to have another gear that they bring. So that will continue. I think we'd have to see about the other ones and how that may or may not work. So.
And have you guys ever thought of adding any awards in the season?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I think we've got things covered how we have it right now. I think in having the top goalie, top defenseman, most sportsmanlike, MVP, top scorer, in the first and second All-Star teams. I think those recognize our top players in the league. Maybe you could look at I know there's some, different leagues in different areas have, top offensive defenseman. You can get on, that kind of thing that goes through, and it gets to be pretty tough as to how you define those. I think we've hit on the key ones that are there. Perhaps we're missing a top forward. That may be the one that we're missing. Versus just having, forwards tend to be the ones that score the most. But yeah, having a top forward, maybe that's the only one that perhaps we're missing.
Yeah, I was also thinking about maybe a top coach award. That could be a good one.
That would be a good one. No, you're right. Yeah, it would be. You're absolutely right. So, good things to note for our next meeting as to what else we can do to recognize our girls. I know. I mean, there may be some coaches will say no, it's all about the girls. It's not about us. And
right.
And so recognize them. But you're right. It is. We do got some wonderful coaches that have been around for a long time and have added a lot to our game.
Yeah, number of great coaches in this league. I've had a pleasure to talk to a good chunk of them throughout this whole first season, I guess you can call it, of MFHL season coverage. It's great to be able to sit down with these great coaches in the league. So just a few more questions before I let you go here, or a couple more. Just in terms of like league all-stars, is that kind of the same process for how you guys pick the league awards?
Yeah, exactly. We go out to all the teams and ask them to pick the first and second all-star team. And then it's really by the numbers. It gets to be, a little more complicated and how it works, but there are some players that clearly show up in the first team all-star that everybody votes for that. And then it's really more about votes and how many votes somebody gets as to whether they're on the first or the second all-star team. But it's the exact same process as we go out to the team. It's not the exec that are doing it. We're not, while we're in tune with what the games are, we're probably not seeing every single game and seeing everything. The coaches are in a much better position than what we are to make those kind of calls. So
yeah, and that's great that you guys really put it on the coaches, the people that are there firsthand to see these players in the league really show their best stuff throughout the season and become league all-stars, whether it be first or second team. So last question before I let you go here, just in terms of like banquets this year, is it going to be more, I'm thinking it's going to be virtual because you don't want to put anyone at risk of being exposed to this virus, right? It really depends on the health order, I guess, that allows it.
Exactly. And I think we have never had a league banquet. And the reason I think is more distance than anything else. It's hard to get everybody on one, because once the league is done, a lot of these girls, as you know, are multi-sport athletes. They move from hockey into whatever other sports, baseball, you name it, right? So to try to find a weekend where you can have something. So it's not anything we've really entertained at this point. And it's more logistics. So I think you may see teams having their banquets, but you're right, it probably will be virtual, much like what it was last time, but dependent on the health order. I mean, I know some did have banquets. The health orders in their local areas allowed them to have up to X number of people, where others were a little bit more strict. So if we can, even virtually, we'll make sure that as league, us on the board will attend those events. We started last year, and it was great to basically see the players and honestly don't recognize half the players because you're used to seeing them with helmets, so you don't really know what they look like when they're looking a lot different than outside of their equipment, and also parents for that matter. We don't tend to have much of a chance to chat with parents, and so it's always, I found in the one banquet I went to, it was great to actually talk to parents and get their thoughts in the league and that kind of stuff. So hopefully we can continue to do that virtually or in person, whatever it may be.
And that's going to do it for today's edition of MFHL season coverage. I've been your host, Graham Forsyth. Of course, today's episode sponsored by Pure Nata and Fabricland Winkler. Special thanks to our sponsors for sponsoring today's edition of the show. Special thanks to you, the viewer, for tuning in to today's episode of Coffee with Graham's MFHL season coverage from whatever platform you watch it on. And also a special thanks to League President Brad Kirk for stopping by and joining me on this wonderful Thursday morning, or should I say Wednesday afternoon when the episode was recorded. I'll be back on the network on Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. for the next installment of Coffee with Graham. But until next time, have a good one, folks. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you later.